Hi friends, my name is Nandita. I am from Andhra Pradesh.
Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss about plant psychology from Unit 4 CBSE syllabus. Children, the description of structure and variation of living organisms over a period of time ended up as two apparently irreconcilable perspectives on biology. The two perspectives essentially rested on two levels of organization of life forms and phenomena. One described at organismic and above level of organization, while the second described at cellular and molecular level of organization. The first resulted in ecology and related disciplines, the second resulted in physiology and biochemistry. Description of physiological process in flowering plants as an example is what is given in the chapter in this unit. The process of minerals, nutrition of plants, photosynthesis, transport, respiration, and ultimately plant growth and development are described in molecular terms but in the context of cellular activities and even at organism level. Wherever appropriate to the relation of the physiological process to environment is also discussed. Children, Melvin Calvin, born in Minnesota in April 1911, and he received his PhD in the chemistry from the University of Minnesota. He served as professor of chemistry at the University of California, Berkeley, just after World War II. When the World War was under shock after the Nagasaki bombing and seeing the ill effects of radioactivity, Calvin and co workers put radioactivity to beneficial use. He, along with J.A. Bassam, studied reactions in green plant forming sugar and other substance from raw material like carbon dioxide, water and minerals by labeling the carbon dioxide with C14. Calvin proposed that plants change the light energy to chemical energy by transferring an electron in an organized array of pigment molecules and other substances. The mapping of the pathway of carbon assimilation in photosynthesis earned him Nobel Prize in 1961. The principles of photosynthesis as established by Calvin are at present being used in studies on renewable resources for energy and material and basic studies in solar energy. Melvin Calvin Research. Children, now let us discuss transport in plants from chapter 11. Children, you have ever wondered how water reaches the top of tall trees, or for that matter, how and why substance move from one cell to other? Whether all substance move in a similar way in the same direction and whether metabolic energy is required for moving substance. Plants need to move molecules over a very long distance, much more than animals do. They also do not have a circulatory system in place. Water taken up by the roots has to reach all parts of the plant up to the very tip of the growing stem. Photosynthetates or food synthesized by the leaves have also to move to all parts including the root tips embedded deep inside the soil. Movement across short distance, say within the cell, across the membrane from the cell to cell within the tissue has also to take place. To understand some of the transport process that takes place in plants, one would have to recollect one's basic knowledge about the structure of the cell and the anatomy of the plant body. We also need to revisit our understanding of diffusion besides gaining some knowledge about chemical potential and ions. When we talk about the movement of substance, we need first to define what kind of movement we are talking about and also what substance we are looking at. In flowering plants, the substance that would need to be transport are water, minerals, nutrients, organic nutrients, and plant growth regulators. Over small distance, substance move by diffusion and by cytoplasmic streaming, supplemented by active transport. Transport over long distance proceeds through the vascular system, means the xylem and the phloem, and it is called translocation. An important aspect that need to be considered is the direction of transport. In rooted plant, transport in xylem, means of water and minerals, is essential unidirectional from roots to the stem. Organic and mineral nutrients, however, undergo multidirectional transport. Organic compounds synthesized in the photosynthetic leaves are exported to all the other parts of the plant, including storage organs. From the storage organs, they are lateral re-exported. The mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots and transported upwards into the stem, leaves, and the growing regions. The mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots and transported upwards into the stems, leaves, and growing regions. When any plant part undergo senescence, nutrients may be withdrawn from such region and moved to the growing parts. Hormones or plant growth regulates and other chemical signals are also transported through in a very small amounts, sometimes in a strictly polarized or unidirectional manner from where they are synthesized to other parts. Hence, in a flowering plant, there is a complex traffic of compounds moving in different directions, each organ receiving some substance and giving out some others. Children, now let us discuss about means of transport. Children, now let us study what is diffusion first. Movement by diffusion is a passive and may be from one part of the cell to the other, or from cell to cell, or over short distance, say from the intercellular spaces of the leaf to the outside. No energy expenditure takes place. In diffusion, molecules move in a random fashion. The net result beginning substance moving from regions of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. Diffusion is a slow process and it is not dependent on a living system. Diffusion is obviously in a gases and liquids, but diffusion in solids is more likely rather than of solids. Diffusion is a very important to plants since it is the only means of gaseous movement within the plant body. Diffusion rates are affected by the gradient of concentration, the permeability of the membrane separating them, temperature and pressure. Let us study the facilitated diffusion. As I pointed out earlier, a gradient must already be present for diffusion to occur. The diffusion rate depends on the size of the substance. Obviously, smaller substance diffuse faster. The diffusion of any substance across a membrane also depends on its solubility in lipids, the major constituent of the membrane. Substance soluble in lipids diffuse through the membrane faster. Substances that have a hydrophilic moiety find it difficult to pass through the membrane. Their movement has to be facilitated. Membrane proteins provide sites at which such molecules cross the membrane. They do not set up a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient must already be present for molecules to diffuse, even if facilitated by the proteins. This process is called facilitated diffusion. In facilitated diffusion, special proteins help move substance across the membrane without expenditure of ATP energy. Facilitated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecules from a low to a high concentration. This would require input of energy. Transport rate reaches maximum when all of the protein transporters are being used. Facilitated diffusion is very specific. It allows cell to select substance for uptake. It is sensitive to inhibitors which react with protein inside chains. the protein from channels in the membrane for molecules to pass through it. Some channels are always open, others can be controlled, some are large, allowing a variety of molecules to cross it. The porins are proteins that form large pores in the outer membrane of the plastids, mitochondria, and some bacteria, allowing molecules up to the size of small proteins to pass through it. An extracellular molecules bound to the transport protein. The transport protein then rotates and releases the molecule inside the cell. Example, water channels made up of 8 different types of aquaporins. Children, let us discuss about passive symphods and antipodes. Some carrier or transport proteins allow diffusion only if two types of molecules move together. In a symphod, both molecules cross the membrane in the same direction. In an antipode, they move in opposite direction. When a molecule moves across the membrane independent of other molecules, and this process is called unipode. Now let us discuss about active transport. Active transport uses energy to transport and pump molecules against a concentration gradient. Active transport is carried out by specific membrane proteins. Hence, different proteins in the membrane play a major role in both active as well as passive transport. Pumps are proteins that use energy to carry substance across the cell membrane. These pumps can transport substance from a low concentration to a high concentration upfill transport. Transport rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transporters are being used and are saturated. Like enzymes that carrier protein is a very specific in what it carries across the membrane. These proteins are sensitive to inhibitors that react with proteins side chains. Let us see what is the comparison of different transport process. A comparison of the different transport mechanisms means protein in the membrane are responsible for facilitated diffusion and active transport and how show common characteristics of being highly selective. They are liable to saturate, respond to inhibitors and are under hormonal regulation. But diffusion, whether facilitate or not, takes place only along a gradient and do not use energy. Children, now let us see the plant-water relations. Water is essential for all physiological activities of the plant and plays a very important role in all living organisms. It provides the medium in which most substances are dissolved. The protoplasm of the cell is nothing but water in which different molecules are dissolved and suspended. A watermelon has over 92% of water. Most herbaceous plants have only about 10 to 15% of its fresh weight as dry matter. Of course, distribution of water within a plant varies. Woody parts have relatively very little water, while soft parts mostly contain water. A seed may appear dry, but it still has water, otherwise it would not be alive and respiring. Terrestrial plants take up a huge amount of water daily, but most of it is lost to the air through evaporation from the leaves, that is transpiration. A mature corn plant absorbs almost 3 liters of water in a day, while a mustard plant absorbs water equal to its own weight in about 5 hours. Because of this high demand of water, it is not surprising that water is often the limited factor for plant growth and productivity in both agricultural and natural environment. Children, now let us discuss about water potential. To comprehend plant water relations and understanding of certain standard terms is necessary. Water potential (Psi W) is a concept fundamental to understand water movement. Solute potential psi s and pressure potential psi p are the two main components that determine water potential. Water molecule possess kinetic energy. In liquid and gases form they are in a random motion that is both rapid and constant. The greater the concentration of water in a system, the greater is its kinetic energy or water potential. Hence, it is obvious that pure water will have the greatest water potential. If two systems containing water are in contact, random movement of water molecule will result in a net movement of water molecules from the system with high energy to the one with low energy. Thus, water will move from the system containing water at high water potential to the one having low water potential. Now let us discuss in detail the process of movement. This process of movement of substance down a gradient of free energy, it is called diffusion. Water potential is denoted by the Greek symbol psi or, and it is expressed in pressure units such as pascals. By a convention, the water potential of pure water at standard temperatures, which is not under any pressure, is taken to be zero. If some solute is dissolved in pure water, the solution has fewer free water molecules and the concentration of water decreases, reducing its water potential. Hence, all solutions have a lower water potential than pure water. The magnitude of this lowering due to dissolution of a solute, it is called solute potential or psi s. The psi s is always negative. The more the solute molecules, the lower, means more negative is the psi s. For a solution at atmospheric pressure, means water potential psi w is equal to solute potential psi s. If a pressure greater than atmospheric pressure is applied to pure water or a solution, its water potential increases. It is equivalent to pumping water from one place to another place. Can you think of any system in our body where pressure is built up? Pressure can be built up in a plant system when water enters a plant cell due to diffusion, causes a pressure build up against the cell wall. It makes the cell turgid. This increases the pressure potential. Pressure potential is usually positive, though in plants negative potential or tension in the water column in the xylem plays a major role in water transport up a stem. Pressure potential is denoted as psi p. Water potential of a cell is affected by both solute and pressure potential. The relationship between them is as follows: psi w is equal to psi s plus psi p. Children, let us discuss about osmosis. The plant cell is surrounded by a cell membrane and a cell wall. The cell wall is freely permeable to water and substance in a solution, hence it not a barrier to movement. In plants, the cells usually contain a large central vacuole whose contents, the vascular sap, contribute to the solute potential of the cell. In plant cells, the cell membrane and the membrane of vacuole, the tonoplast, together are important determinants of movement of molecules in or out of the cell. Osmosis is a term used refers specifically to the diffusion of water across a differentially or selectively permeable membrane. Osmosis occurs spontaneously in response to a driving force. The net direction and rate of osmosis depend on both the pressure gradient and concentration gradient. Water will move from its region of higher chemical potential to its region of lower chemical potential until equilibrium is reached. At equilibrium, the two chambers should have nearly the same water potential. You may have made a potato osmometer in your earlier classes in school. If the potato tuber is placed in water, the water enters the cavity in the potato tuber containing concentrated solution of sugar due to the osmosis. Studying in which the two chambers A and B containing the solutions are separated by a semi-permeable membrane. Let us discuss the another experiment where a solution of sucrose in a water taken in a funnel is separated from pure water in a beaker by selectively permeable membrane. You can get this kind of membrane in an egg. Remove the yolk and albumin through a small hole at one end of the egg and place the cell in a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid for a few hours. The egg cell dissolves, leaving the membrane intact. Water will move into the funnel, resulting in rise in the level of the solution in the funnel. This will continue till the equilibrium is reached. In case sucrose does not diffuse out through the membrane, will this equilibrium be ever reached? External pressure can be applied from the upper part of the funnel such that no water diffusion into the funnel through the membrane. This pressure required to prevent water from diffusing is in fact the osmotic and this is the function of the solute concentration. More the solute concentration, greater will be the pressure required to prevent water from diffusing in. Numerically, osmotic pressure is equivalent to the osmotic potential, but the sign is opposite. Osmotic pressure is positive pressure applied while osmotic potential is negative. Children, now let us discuss about plasmolysis. The behavior of a plant cell or a tissues with regard to water movement depends on the surrounding solution. If the external solution balances the osmotic pressure of the cytoplasm, it is said to be isotonic. If the external solution is more dilute than the cytoplasm, it is hypotonic. And if the external solution is more concentrated, and it is hypertonic. Cells walls in hypotonic solution and sink is hypertonic ones. Plasmolysis occurs when water moves out of the cell and the cell membrane of the plant cell sinks away from its cell wall. This occurs when the cell or a tissue is placed in a solution that is hypertonic, means has more solutes to the protoplasm. Water moves out, it is first lost from the cytoplasm and then from the vacuole. The water, when drawn out of the cell through diffusion into the extracellular, means outside cell fluid, causes the protoplast to sink away from the walls. The cell is said to be plasmolysed. The movement of water occurs across the membrane, moving from an area of higher water potential to an area of lower water potential outside the cell. Children, let us see what occupies the space between the cell wall and the sunken protoplast in the plasmolysed cell. When the cell is placed in an isotonic solution, there is no net flow of water towards the inside or outside. If the external solution balances the osmotic pressure of the cytoplasm, it is said to be isotonic. When water flows into the cell and out of the cell are in equilibrium, the cells are said to be flaccid. The process of plasmolysis is usually reversible. When the cells are placed in a hypotonic solution, means higher water potential or dilute solution as compared to the cytoplasm, the water diffusion into the cells causing the cytoplasm to build up a pressure against the wall that is called turgor pressure. The pressure exerted by the protoplast due to the entry of water against the rigid walls is called pressure potential, SWIP. Because of the rigidity of the cell wall, the cell does not rupture. This turgor pressure is ultimately responsible for enlargement and extension growth of cells. What would be SIP of the placid cells? Which organisms other than plant possess a cell wall? Let us discuss about imbibition. Children, imbibition is a special type of diffusion when water is absorbed by solids, collides, causing them to increase in volume. The classical examples of imbibition are absorption of water by seeds and dry wood. The pressure that is produced by the swelling of wood had been used by prehistoric man to split rocks and boulders. If it were not for the pressure due to imbibition, seedling would not have been able to emerge out of the soil into the open. They probably would not have been able to establish. Imbibition is also a diffusion since water movement is a long concentration gradient. The seeds and other such materials have almost no water, hence they absorb water easily. Water potential gradient between the absorbent and the liquid imbibed is essential for imbibition. In addition, for any substance to imbibe any liquid, affinity between the absorbent and the liquid is also prerequisite. Children, now let us discuss about how long distance that water transport. At some earlier stage, you might have carried out an experiment where you had placed a twig bearing white flowers in colored water and had watched it turn color. On examining the cut end of the twig after a few hours, you had noticed the region through which the colored water moved. The experiment very easily demonstrates that the path of water movement is through the vascular bundles, more specifically the xylem. Now we have to go to further and try and understand the mechanism of movement of water and other substance up a plant. Long distance transport of substance within a plant cannot be by diffusion alone. Diffusion is a slow process. It can account for only short distance movement of molecules. For example, the movement of molecules across a typical plant cell about 50 µm takes place approximately 2.5 s. At this rate, you calculate how many years it would take for the movement of molecules over a distance of 1 meter within a plant by diffusion alone. In large and complex organisms, often substances have to be moved to long distance. Sometimes the sites of production or absorption and sites of storage are too far from each other. Diffusion or active transport would not suffice. Especially long distance transport system become necessary so as to move substance across long distance and at a much faster rate. Water and minerals and food are generally moved by a mass or a bulk flow system. Mass flow is the movement of substance in bulk or en masse from one point to another as a result of pressure difference between the 2 points. It is a characteristic of mass flow that substance, whether in a solution or in a suspension, were swept along at the same space as in a flowing river. This is unlike diffusion, where different substances move independently depending on their concentration gradients. Bulk flow can be achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient, means garden hose, or a negative hydrostatic pressure, means garden, example, sucking through a straw. The bulk movement of substance through the conducting or a vascular tissues of plant is called translocation. Do you remember studying across sections of roots, stems and leaves of higher classes and studying the vascular system? The higher plants have a highly specialized vascular tissues. Xylem is associated with translocation of mainly water, mineral salts and some organic nitrogens and hormones from roots to the aerial part of the plant. The phloem translocates a variety of organic and inorganic solutes mainly from the leaves to other parts of the plants. Children, let us see how do plants absorb water. We know that the roots absorb most of the water that goes into the plant, obviously. That is why we apply water to the soil and not to the leaves. The responsibility of absorption of water and minerals is more specifically the function of the root hairs that are present in millions at the tips of the root. The root hairs are thin-walled cylinder extensions of the root epidermal cells that greatly increase the surface area of absorption. Water is absorbed along with mineral solutes by the root hairs purely by diffusion. Once water is absorbed by the root hairs, it can move deeper into root layers by two distinct pathways. One is apoplast pathway, second one is Symplast pathway. The apoplast pathway is a system of adjacent cell walls that is continuous throughout the plant except at the Casparian trips of the endodermis in the roots. The apoplastic movement of water occurs exclusively through the intercellular spaces and the walls of the cells. Movement through the apoplast does not involve across the cell membrane. This movement is dependent on the gradient. The apoplast does not provide any barrier to water movement, and water movement is through mass flow. As water evaporates into the intercellular spaces or the atmosphere, tension develops in the continuation stream of water in the apoplast. Hence, mass flow of water occurs due to the adhesive and cohesive properties of water. Let us see the symplastic system. The symplastic system is a system of interconnected protoplast. Neighboring cells are connected through cytoplasmic strands that extend through plasmodesmata. During symplastic movement, the water travels through the cells. Their cytoplasm intercellular movement is through the plasmodesmata. Water has to enter the cell through the cell membrane, hence the movement is relatively slower. The movement is again down a potential gradient. Symplastic movement may be aided by cytoplasmic streaming. You may have observed cytoplasmic streaming in cells of the hydrilla leaf. The movement of chloroplast due to streaming is easily visible. Most of the water flows in the root occurs via the apoplast since the cortical cells are loosely packed, hence offer no resistance to water movement. However, the inner boundary of the cortex, the endodermis, is impervious to water because of a band of suberized matrix called Casparian trip. Water molecules are unable to penetrate the layer, so they are directed to wall regions that are not suberized into the cells proper through the membrane. The water then moves through the symplast and against crosses a membrane to reach the cells of xylem. The movement of water through the root layers is ultimately symplastic in the endodermis. This is the only way water and other solutes can enter the vascular cylinder. Once inside the xylem, water is again free to move between the cells as well as through them. In younger roots, the water enters directly into the xylem vessels or tracheids. These are non-living conduits and so are part of the apoplast. The path of water and minerals ions into the vascular system is summarized in a figure. Some plants have additional structures associated with them that help in water absorption. Mycorrhiza is a symbiotic association of fungus with a root system. The fungal filaments form a network around the young root or they penetrate the root cells. The hyphae have a very large surface area that absorb mineral ions and water from the soil from a much larger volume of soil that perhaps a root cannot do. The fungus provides minerals and water to the roots. In turn, the root provides sugar and N-containing compounds to the mycorrhiza. Some plants have an obligate association with mycorrhiza. For example, pinus seeds cannot germinate and establish without the presence of mycorrhiza. Now let us see water movement up a plant. Children, we looked at how plants absorb water from the soil and move it into the vascular tissues. We now have to try and understand how this water is transported to various parts of the plant. Is the water movement active or is it still passive? Since the water has to be moved up a stem against gravity, what provides the energy for this? Let us discuss in detail. Let us discuss about root pressure. As various ions from the soil are actively transported into vascular tissues of the roots, water flows its potential gradient and increases the pressure inside the xylem. This positive pressure is called root pressure and can be responsible for pushing up water to small heights in the stem. How can we see that root pressure exists? Choose a small soft stem plant and on a day when there is a plenty of atmospheric moisture, cut the stem horizontally near the base with a sharp blade. Early in the morning, you will soon see the drops of solution ooze out from the cut stem. This comes out due to the positive root pressure. If you fix a rubber tube to the cut stem as a sleeve, you can actually collect the measure of the rate of exudation and also determine the composition of the exudates. Effects of root pressure is also observable at night and earlier morning when evaporation is low and excess water collects in the form of droplets around special openings of veins near the tips of grass blades and leaves of many herbaceous plants. Water loss through in this liquid phases is known as guttation. Root pressure can be at best only provide and a modest push in the overall process of water transport. They obviously do not play a major role in water movement up tall trees. The greatest contribution of root pressure may be to re-establish the continuation chain of water molecules in the xylem, which often break under the enormous tension created by transpiration. Root pressure does not account for the majority of water transport. Most plants meet their needs by transpiration pull. Now let us see what is transpiration pull. Despite the absence of a heart or a circulatory system in plants, the upward flow of water through the xylem in plants can achieve fairly high rates up to 15 meters per hour. How this movement accomplished? You have a doubt. A long standing question is whether water is pushed or pulled through the plant. Most researchers agree that water is mainly pulled through the plant and that the driving force for the process is transpiration from the leaves. This is referred to as the Cohen-Shu tension transpiration pull model of water transport. But what generates this transpirational pull? Water is transient in plants. Less than 1% of water reaching the leaves is used in photosynthesis and plant growth. Most of it is lost through the stomata in leaves. This loss of water is known as transpiration. You have studied transpiration in an earlier classes by enclosing a healthy plant in a polythene bag and observing the droplets of water formed inside the bag. You could have also studied loss from a leaf using cobalt chloride paper, which returns color and absorbing water. Children, now let us discuss about transpiration. Transpiration is the evaporative loss of water by plants. It occurs mainly through stomata. Beside the loss of water vapor in transpiration, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the leaf also occurs through this stomata. Normally, stomata are opening in the daytime and closed during the night time. The intermediate causes of the opening or closing of stomata is a change in the turgidity of the gourd cells. The inner wall of each gourd cell towards the pore of stomatal apparatus is thick and elastic. When turgidity increases within the two gourd cells flanking each stomatal apparatus or pore, the thin outer walls bulge out and force the inner walls into a crescent shape. The opening of the stoma is also aided due to the orientation of the microfibrils in the cell walls of the gourd cells. Cellulose microfibrils are oriented radially rather than longitudinally, making it easier for the stoma to open. When the gourd cells lose turgor due to the loss of water, the elastic inner walls regain their original shape, the gourd cells become placid, and the stoma closes. Usually, the lower surface of dorsiventral leaf has a greater number of stomata, while in an isobilateral leaf, they are about equal on both surfaces. Transpiration is affected by several external factors like temperature, light, humidity, wind pressure. Plant factors that also affect transpiration, including the number of distribution of stomata, percentage of open stomata, water status of a plant, canopy structure, etc. Children, the transpiration driven ascent of xylem sap depends mainly on the following physical properties of water: coherence and adherence. Coherence means mutual attraction between water molecule. Adherence means attraction of water molecules to polar surfaces such as the surface to tertiary elements. Surface tension. Water molecules are attached to each other in a liquid phase more than to water in the gas phase. These properties give water high tensile strength, that is an ability to resist a pulling force, and high capillarity, that is the ability to rise in thin tubes. In plants, capillarity is aided by the small diameter of the tracheary elements, the tracheids and vessel elements. The process of photosynthesis requires water. The system of xylem vessels from the root of the leaf vein can supply the needed water. But what force does a plant use to move water molecules into the leaf's parenchyma cells where they are needed? As water evaporates through the stomata, since within thin film of water over the cells is continuous, it results in pulling of water molecules by molecule into the leaf from the xylem. Also, because of lower concentration of water vapor in the atmosphere as compared to the substomatal cavity and intercellular spaces, water diffuses into surrounding air. This creates a pull measurements revival that the force generated by transpiration can create pressure sufficient to lift a xylem side column of water over 130 meters of height. Children, let us discuss about transpiration and photosynthesis. A compromised transpiration has more than one purpose. It creates transpiration pull for absorption and transport of plants, and second one supplies water for photosynthesis. Third one transport minerals from the soil to all parts of the plant, and it cools the leaves sometimes 10 to 15 degrees by evaporative cooling, and maintain the shape and structure of the plants by keeping cells turgid and actively photosynthesizing plant has an insatiable need for water. Photosynthesis is limited by available water which can be swiftly depleted by transpiration. The humidity of rainforest is larger due to the vast cycling of water from root to leaf to atmosphere and back to the soil. The evolution of the C4 photosynthetic system is probably one of the strategies of maximizing the availability of CO2 while minimizing water loss, etc. CO4 plants are twice as efficient as C3 plants in terms of fixing carbon dioxide. However, a CO4 plant loses only a half of much water as a C3 plant for the same amount of CO2 fixed. Children, let us see the uptake and transport of minerals and nutrients. Plants obtain their carbon and most of their oxygen from CO2 in the atmosphere. However, their remaining nutritional requirements are obtained from water and minerals in the soil. Let us see the uptake of minerals and ions. Unlike water, all minerals cannot be passively absorbed by the roots. Two factors account for this. One is minerals are present in the soil as charged particles like ions which cannot move across cell membrane, and second, the concentration of minerals in the soil is usually lower than the concentration of minerals in the roots. Therefore, most minerals must enter the root by active absorption into cytoplasm of epidermal cells. This needs energy in the form of ATP. The active uptake of ions is partially responsible for water potential gradient in roots and therefore for the uptake of water by osmosis. Some ions also move into the epidermal cells passively. Ions are absorbed from the soil by both passive and active transport. Specific proteins in the membrane of root hair cells actively pumps ions from the soil into the cytoplasm of the epidermal cells. Like all cells, the epidermal cells have many transport proteins embedded in their plasma membrane. They let some solutes across the membrane but not others. Transport proteins of epidermal cells are control points where a plant adjusts the quantity and types of solutes that reach the xylem. Note that the root endodermis, because of the layer of suberin, has the ability to actively transport ions in one direction only. Children, let us see the translocation of minerals and ions. After ions have reached xylem through active or passive uptake or a combination of two, their further transport up to the stem to all parts of the plant is through the transpiration stream. The chief sinks for the minerals elements are to growing regions of the plant such as apical and lateral meristem, young leaves, developing flowers, fruits, seeds and storage organs. Unloading of mineral ions occur at the fine vein ending through a diffusion and active uptake by the cells. Mineral ions are frequently remobilized, particularly from older sensing parts, and older dying leaves export much of their mineral content to younger leaves. Similarly, before leaf fall into deciduous plants, minerals are removed to other parts. Elements most readily mobilized are phosphorus, sulfur, nitrogen and potassium. Some elements that are structural compounds like calcium are not remobilized. An analysis of xylem exudates shows that through some of the nitrogen travels as inorganic ions, much of it is carried into organic form as amino acids and related compounds. Similarly, all amounts of P and S are carried as organic compounds. In addition, small amount of exchange of minerals does not take place between xylem and phloem. Hence, it is not that we can clearly make a distinction and say categorically that xylem transport only inorganic nutrients while phloem transport only organic minerals, as was traditionally believed. Children, let us see the phloem transport. Flow from source to sink. Food, primarily sucrose, is transported by the vascular tissue phloem from a source to a sink. Usually the source is understood to be that part of the plant which synthesizes the food, that is the leaf and sink. The part that needs or stores the food, but the source of sink may be reversed depending on the season or the plant needs. Sugar stored in roots may be mobilized to become a source of food in the earlier spring when the buds of trees act as sink. They need energy for growth and development of the photosynthetic apparatus. Since the source-sink relationship is variable, the direction of movement in the phloem can be upwards or downwards, that is bidirectional. This contrasts with that of xylem, where the movement is always unidirectional, means that is upwards. Hence, unlike one-way flow of water in transpiration, food in phloem sap can be transported in any required direction so long as there is a source of sugar and a sink able to use, store or remove the sugar. Phloem sap is mainly water and sucrose, but other sugars, hormones and amino acids are also transported and translocated through phloem. Children, let us see the pressure flow or mass flow hypothesis. The accepted mechanism used for the translocation of sugars from sucrose to sink is called pressure flow hypothesis. As glucose is prepared at the source by photosynthesis, it is converted as sucrose. The sugar is then moved in the form of sucrose into the companion cells and then it to be living phloem sieve tube cells by active transport. This process of loading at the source of produces a hypertonic condition in the phloem. Water in the adjacent xylem moves into the phloem by osmosis. As osmotic pressure builds up, the phloem sap will move to areas of lower pressure. At the sink, osmotic pressure must be reduced. Again, active transport is necessary to move the sucrose out of the phloem sap and into the cells, which will use the sugar, converting it into energy, starch, or cellulose. As sugars are removed, the osmotic pressure decreases and water moves out of the phloem. To summarize, the movement of sugars in the phloem begins at the source, where sugars are loaded into a sieve tube. Loading of the phloem set up a water potential gradient that facilitates the mass of movement into the phloem. Phloem tissues is composed of sieve tube cells which form long columns with holes into their end walls called sieve plates. Cytoplasmic strands pass through the holes in the sieve plates, so forming continuation filaments. As hydrostatic pressure in the sieve tube of phloem increases, the pressure flow begins and the sap moves through the phloem. Meanwhile, at the sink, incoming sugars are actively transported out of the phloem and removed. As a complex carbohydrates, the loss of solute produce a high water potential in the phloem and a water passes out, returning eventually to xylem. A simple experiment called griddling was used to identify the tissue through which the food is transported. On the trunk of a tree arising a bark up to a depth of phloem layer can be carefully removed. In the absence of downward movement of food, the portion of the bark above the ring on the stem becomes swollen after a few weeks. This simple experiment shows that phloem is the tissue responsible for translocation of food and the transport takes place in one direction, that is towards the roots. This experiment can be performed by you easily. Children, let us summarize the main points in this lesson. Plants obtain a variety of inorganic elements like ions and salts from their surroundings, especially from water and soil. The movement of these nutrients from environment into the plant as well as one plant to the another plant essentially involves movement across a cell membrane. Transport across cell membrane can be through diffusion, facilitated transport to active transport. Water and minerals absorbed by roots are transported by xylem, and the organic material synthesized in the leaf is transported to other parts of the plant through phloem. Passive transport and active transports are two modes of nutrient transports across the cell membrane in living organisms. In passive transport, nutrients move across the membrane by diffusion without any use of energy, as it is always down the concentration gradient and hence entropy driven. This diffusion of substance depends on their size, solubility in water or organic solvents. Osmosis is a special type of diffusion of water across a selectively permeable membrane which depends on pressure gradients and concentration gradient. In active transport, energy in the form of ATP is utilized to pump molecules against a concentration gradient across membranes. Water potential is the potential energy of water molecules which helps in the movement of water. It is determined by solute potential and pressure potential. The osmotic behavior of cells depend on the surrounding of solution. If the surrounding solution of the cell is hypertonic, it gets plasmolized. The absorption of water by seeds and dry woods takes place by a special type of diffusion called imbibition. In higher plants, there is a vascular system comprising of xylem and phloem responsible for translocation of water, minerals and food cannot be moved within the body of the plant by diffusion alone. Their are therefore transported by a mass flow system movement of substance in bulk from one point to another as a result of pressure difference between the 2 points. Water absorbed by the root hairs moves into the root tissues by two distinct pathways, that is apoplast and symplast. Various ions and waters from the soil can be transported up to a small height in stems by root pressure. Transpirational pull model is the most acceptable to explain the transport of water. Transpiration is the loss of water in the form of vapor from the plant parts through stomata. Temperature, light, humidity, wind pressure, and number of stomata affected the rate of transpiration. Excess of water is also removed through tips of leaves of plants by guttation. Phloem is responsible for transport of food, primarily sucrose, from the source of the sink to the sink. The translocation in phloem is bidirectional. The source of sink's relationship is variable. The translocation in phloem is explained by the pressure flow hypothesis. Thank you.